In 2017, the Andrew Holness-led government apologized to Rastafarians for the Coral Gardens incident of 1963. But many Jamaicans don't even know what was this incident that caused the government of the day to unleash the state apparatus that led to the massacre of several Rastafarians that we now call Bad Friday. Let's talk about it. For this piece, I'm using the accounts of Professor Horace Campbell, who teaches African American history at the University of Syracuse in New York. He had a death in the family at the time, and so he has used that event as the grounding for his recollection of the Coral Gardens incident in 1963. In 1962, the largest landowner in St. James was the Costa Sir Francis Moncrief Kerr Jarrett. And he at the time continuously petitioned the governor and the colonial office to clamp down on the Rastafarian movement, who he described as an undesirable sect, and asked the governor to do everything to discourage their activities. At the time, Montego Bay's ruling families included the Kerr Jarretts, the DeLissas, Walter Fletcher, among others. There was a concerted effort by these families to develop Montego Bay and its environs for tourism, but much of the areas that they wanted, small farmers were occupying these lands, these properties, and they were doing subsistence farming. One of these farmers was Rudolph Franklin, who himself was converted to Rastafarianism and began to spread the word. He influenced many others to join the Rastafarian movement, and so naturally he became a target of much hostility by the police. Side note, the Dangerous Drugs Act came into being as a direct result of Jamaica's ruling families petitioning the government to institute laws that would clamp down and imprison poor, dark-skinned men, and in particular Rastafarians, for the use of ganja. So the Rastafarians would walk on foot from downtown Montego Bay in the railway lane area up Barnett Street through Salt Spring up to Flower Hill and Flanker out to the White House Fishing Village. That area had been earmarked for tourism, and the ruling families joined with the police to criminalize the Rastafarians walking along this route. In the Gleaner's account, it said the 1963 massacre reportedly stemmed from an old incident in which a Rastafarian sympathizer, Rudolph Franklin, was shot and seriously injured by a property owner in a dispute over lands. Franklin and others decided to exact revenge by burning down the Ken Douglas Shell service station, and the incident caused a massive state crackdown against Rastafarians. In Dr. Campbell's account, he said that Bustamante had demonstrated to local and foreign developers that the space around the Half Moon Hotel would be free from the presence of bearded Rastas. The Rastafarians were asserting their rights to walk alongside this route. The ruling class had determined that they wanted to develop for tourism. Things came to a head on Holy Thursday, April 11, 1963. A group of Rastafarians set fire to a gas station owned by Ken Douglas. In response, the then Prime Minister, Alexander Bustamante, gave the order to bring in all Rastas, dead or alive. And the state unleashed a massive coalition of military and police upon the Rastafarian community. During the altercations on April 11, Detective Corporal Mulburn lost his life, and he had been a strong enforcer against Rastafarian ideology. So the police and the military were steadfast in exacting revenge for his death. By the time the incursion ended on April 13th, 3 Rastafarians, 3 civilians, and 2 police officers were dead. They went into every working class neighborhood and rounded up every Rastafarian that they could find, including women. They rounded up so many Rastafarians, not only from Coral Gardens, but from nearby communities and parishes, that the Barnett Street lockup was full and overflowing, much like it was in the days of enslavement. Because this happened round about Good Friday in 1963, this incident came to be known in the Rastafarian community as Bad Friday. Fast forward to 2017. Prime Minister Andrew Holness issued an official apology to the Rastafarian community for the incidents that happened in 1963 and vowed that the state would never again weaponize against its citizens. He also promised restitution to the Rastafarian community with the establishment of a $10 million fund that would assist the beneficiaries of those who suffered loss during that incident. There was also a promise that 6 acres of lot at Pinnacle in St. Catherine would be declared as a protected heritage site. So I don't know if any of these things has happened since in the last 6 years, since these promises were made. Perhaps a member of the Rastafarian community or someone who is more closely attached to these agreements may be able to shed some light as to what development, if any, has taken place since these promises were made. I think the Coral Gardens incident is another important part of our history that we don't talk about, and that in reliving and retelling Jamaican history, those parts of it are left out. Why have we always been told to shun Rastafarians? Why have we always been told denigrating things about Rastafarians? And in the retelling of those stories, we don't hear those parts, right? They tell us that Rastafarians are dangerous because they fought for their rights to this land, and because they were standing up against the ruling class, that means they were dangerous. Why have the state apparatus been weaponized against Rastafarians for so many years? Why were we routinely shaving their heads? Right? Why were they routinely arrested for smoking ganja? These are just a few of the experiences that people have shared that they or members of their family or friends or just people they knew experienced at the hand of the state, in our institutions, by other members of their family, because they subscribe to the Rastafarian faith, or because they wore locks. It is interesting that as Jamaicans, we don't probe any deeper. We accept a lot of things at face value, and we don't probe any deeper to ask why. Why did this happen? Okay, but why does this rule exist? Okay, but why does this law exist? Right? Okay, but why do we think so? And more Jamaicans need to be asking these questions. And to find the answer is in our history. Read our history, learn our history. That's where the answer lies.